What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Donnie Graham Builds. And this week's episode, we are tackling this dual vanity for our master bathroom. This is made out of ashwood lumber. It comes with U-shaped drawers. That way you can work around your P-trap. You don't have to have cabinets if you don't want them. And a nice decorative shelf down below for towels, for supplies, or just to look pretty. So with all that said, let's get to work. All right, guys, this one is going to take a while, so we're going to jump right in. We opted to use ash lumber for our vanity. It is fairly inexpensive and a really durable solid wood. So first step is going to be get things jointed. I like to joint two sides square to one another and mark those with a reference. That way I can put that side face down and snip through my planer to make sure I have a perfectly square piece of stock to work with. Now, planing takes a while, so we're going to skip right around that and get to our finished dimensions for our legs. As for the panel, I'm going to do a continuous grain drawer face along the front, which means I need to glue up a whole panel to cover that entire space. Now in this case, I like to use what is called the in and out method. After laying my panels out and marking them, I'll mark each connecting face with an in or an out, and then I will face that board into the fence of the joiner or out away from the fence. And that gives you really clean joints in case your joiner fence is out of square. Maybe it's 89 degrees, maybe it's 91. In this case, since you're reversing the boards, the joints would be complementary as opposed to conflicting. And you'll see that here in the glue up when I get really clean joints. Now, the best way to know that you've got a really clean edge for a glue up is a nice even squeeze out. You can see that little bead right there, and if you're not cranking on your clamps. Now, I'm barely tightening these, making sure everything stays coplanar because I didn't add dominoes or any other kind of alignment, and I'm getting really clean squeeze out all the way down the board with minimal pressure. That means all my angles are matching up nicely. Now with that set aside to dry, I can move on to the lowest section of the vanity, which is going to be this retro cleated looking shelf that we're going to cut baskets or towels on, just to have some open storage for a little bit of a decorative element. Now the next pieces we're going to work on here are making up the face frame. These are longer boards, so I want to use my crosscut sled, but I'm going to use my adjustable fins so I have a firm stop when I need to measure, but as I push the board forward, I'm no longer pinched between the blade and the fence. It's a really safe way to do that. Now we have all our stock here and we can move on to assembly. And of course, in typical Donnie Graham Builds fashion, my mic was not actually on, so you can hear it, but the audio's pretty crummy. Basically, what I'm discussing here is different joinery methods. Now I have a pocket hole jig and I have a Festool domino. My pocket hole jig is the K4, the domino is the 1500 or the smaller version. Both have great abilities to join things together. It really just depends on which circumstance. Now, in this case, the way that I'm pulling this vanity together, I'm going to use the domino in some places for accurate spacing, and I'm going to use the pocket hole jig in other places for easy assembly. So we're going to get into it here and see how these turn out. I did have someone online one time call me a joinery purist, which I thought was priceless because I don't care about the joinery. I'm not cutting dovetails, I'm not doing perfect miters. I just want something that's going to be long lasting and get the job done. Again, we're working on this section here, the dark teal colored bottom rungs that are going to make up that open shelf, and the pocket hole will shine better than the domino in some cases, and the domino will do a better job here. So let's get to work. Now, if you haven't noticed by now, I do sound a little raspy. I apologize. I've been dealing with an upper respiratory infection for the last 2 weeks. I tried to stall in doing this audio, but the channel needs to keep putting out videos if it's going to grow. So bear with me and hopefully I'll be better in the next one. Now, I like to clamp all my boards together to make sure I have consistent spacing and mark the line down each board at the same time, and then use the domino for that spacing to bring everything together. You could follow this same practice with the pocket hole jig. It probably wouldn't be quite as precise. It would definitely be slower, but to the naked eye, no one would be able to tell the difference. Okay, now with those all glued up and set aside, we can move on to the actual cabinet carcass, which we are making out of ash veneered plywood. I like to do my rough breakdown with my track saw and then take all the boards over to my table saw to set the fence, lock it in place, and get nice, consistent spacing on everything. Now to pull this all together, we are going to use the pocket hole jig because this is a cabinet, and that's what pocket holes are for. It's plenty strong, and in this case, way faster than the domino. Now, as far as assembling with pocket hole screws, I like to get everything in place, clamp it really tight because pocket holes will pull on you because they're drilled at an angle. It'll shift your piece and pull it away from where you want it to be. So clamp it nice and securely before driving home those screws. I also went ahead and added a little bit of a round over here just for a soft edge, and then my camera died.
All right, so my camera died last night. I got a little carried away. So far, we've assembled all 3 walls with all the supporting panels and the base structure with the back stretchers. So we still need to do our structures at the top, which is also going to serve as a face frame to keep things looking nice and pretty. These bottom, let's call them rails, are now dry. I took them out of clamps. I'm going to give them a quick sanding, probably just a 120 and 150, and get them installed. This is one of those cases where pocket hole screws are going to be way easier to install since these pieces are already connected based on just how I brought everything together. So I'm going to sand, drill some pocket holes, attach these. I'll use spacer blocks underneath. That way everything hits at the exact same level. So let's do that.
Now, like I said, hitting these here with 150 and then 220 grit to give it a nice soft touch. My daughters are 1 and 3, and I can see one of them probably sitting on this shelf at some point in the future. So I want to make sure that no splinters or sharp edges are waiting for them. Once everything is sanded, I can attach the little blocks on the end that will make up the final piece of the rail, again using those spacers and securing everything nice and tight before driving home those pocket hole screws. From that, it was just rinse and repeat all the way down, and then I can install those rails in between those supporting pieces. It's just what I do when I'm out, so try not to hold me down, feel alive when I'm in this town. Look at those beautiful stars, I wanna drive a faster car. Nothing can break me, no, no, nothing can break me. Lay my troubles to rest, blow the smoke through my cigarette. City lights looking fine, and I know this is my time now. I'm gonna be myself, or I could be so. And with that final face frame piece attached, we can move on to final sanding. I went over everything thoroughly with 220 grit, which is probably overkill, but I'm a firm believer that sanding can make or break a project. If you buy a new piece of furniture, if you make a new piece of furniture, nothing will give you regret like touching the surface and it being rough. So do your due diligence and just do a good job there. Next, I added a couple rising blocks. That way we had really good contact with our vanity that we bought for this piece, and then asked my lovely wife to help me put it into place. She was super helpful, although after a while I started asking a bunch of questions that made me second guess whether or not this was a good idea at all. I'm just kidding. She's actually really, really supportive, and we were just talking through options here. So let's move on.
Okay, so the bathroom's almost done. The last thing is going to be to add the vanity and connect everything. So I realized while I was thinking about which way I wanted to do everything that I don't have to wait to install the faucet sets until it's in the room and I'm upside down on my back, kind of arched, trying to remember if lefty is still loosey when you're looking at something upside down. It's the number of times I've been in that situation and totally botched it. It's a lot. So I realized I can just install these standing upright, looking directly at them at eye level, and it'll be tremendously easier. So when you have this opportunity, I cannot recommend it enough. Let's take a closer look at what we're looking at here. Okay, so let's take a look at our faucet set. They all come with instructions. We chose to do, this is not the exact model, but we chose to do 3 different fittings. That way you're not restricted to how wide the spacing is here versus whatever countertop you decide to go with. If you make your own countertop, that's obviously not an issue. You can make it whatever size you need to fit the faucet, but in our case, we bought a cultured marble countertop that had spacing already figured out. So only a individual setting would work. Instead of 3 that are connected, these each function independently, which means they could be spaced apart as we need them to. Nice, clean, modern set. They all have a similar function. Each water supply, like this is the cold line, will have a gasket that sits on top of the countertop, and then this will go through the hole in the countertop, and this will be attached underneath, and it'll apply the pressure you need. Once you get it tight, you can drive these screws in. Nice tight seal, and it'll apply the pressure you need in order to keep this from wobbling around, and then you go into connecting your water supply. For this particular model, full disclosure, I haven't really looked at this yet, but it looks like each side has its water supply that comes down and connects into the water supply from the wall. And then this, let's say copper connection here, this brass rod, will connect to one side of this Y fitting, and the Y fitting will connect to the bottom of the main faucet. That way you've got your water coming in, going and meeting in the middle, and then you can disperse how much hot or cold you need based on whatever you're doing. So let's give this a go. This is super simple to do. You'll only need, depending on the set, a couple of tools. I've got pliers and wrenches on the side, but from what I can tell, I'll need a set of wrenches to tighten in the drain based on this little octagon piece here, and the faucet based on this piece here, this nut. Otherwise, these look like they just spin in and then you tighten them with a Phillips head screw. So it should be pretty straightforward. Okay, and we're at the point now where we're ready to connect all of our water supplies, both the hot and cold waters coming in as well as the drainage going out. We saw in a previous clip, I got the faucets attached before getting this in place because that would have been just a nightmare to try to reach back there and get all those fixtures tightened down and square and looking good. So for this is pretty straightforward. I remember, gosh, what is it, 4 years ago now, 5 years ago, before I'd really started DIYing renovations. I was only doing woodworking, so I wasn't comfortable with plumbing. I wasn't comfortable with electrical. I called a plumber because I needed a P-trap on a utility sink in my basement. He showed up. He might have been there 8 minutes, and to install that P-trap was $240. And I was like, nope, never again. I'm gonna figure out how to do this. That's an absurd amount of money for the amount of time that he was there. So big box stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever, sell P-trap kits. They have everything you need. You might need, depending on what size the drain is coming out of the wall, mine's 1.5 inches. P-trap's 1.25 inches. So I have an adapter here that goes down from 1.5 inches to 1.25 inches. Pretty straightforward. You're gonna need some PVC cement sealant adhesive junk, or if you have ABS, make sure you get the ABS. There's a handful of different things and each one only works for a certain number of substances. So make sure you grab the right one. Otherwise, have paper towels in case you get some water places, have a bucket in case something goes horribly wrong. But really all you're gonna need is a couple of wrenches, and that's pretty much it. So let's knock this out. Okay, so we have our 1.5 inch pipe coming out, and then this is an adapter to go from 1.5 inches to 1.5 inches, but this side's threaded. So now we can slide our P-trap in here, which is this guy. This comes in 2 components. This is how it goes together. You'll slide that in there. You can see where I already did it with some of the blue goopy stuff. And that will be secured using this little guy. So it's called a slip washer nut, and it'll go right over there and secure. Sorry for the mediocre camera work, but I'll show you here in just 1 second. Okay, so the key thing to keep in mind here is your jumping sizes. Nearly all of these are 1.25 inches. So you need to be able to go from 1.25 inches to 1.5 inch piping. And the 1.5 inch pipe is also gonna be what's coming out of your wall more often than not. So you're going 1.5 inches, have the adapter to be able to thread on the back of your P-trap with the washer. That's that red line in there. You go down, this comes as a unit. So this is 1.5 inch coupling to 2.5 inch pieces. Your P-trap comes over, up. This is also 1.5 inch coupling with the 1.5 inch washer. This piece is 1.5 inch. This is an 1.5 inch coupling, but that red washer that I showed you just a second ago is actually a transition washer that will take you from 1.25 inches down to 1.5 inches, and that is vital. Otherwise, you cannot make this connection. So right now, everything's hooked up. The water supplies, I mean, that's really simple. It's a 3/8 screw. It's just threaded, you tighten it on with the wrench, you turn the water on. I turn it really slowly, and then you can feel and hear it pressurize the line. And this particular model, which will be linked below, has a red indicator for the hot and a blue indicator for the cold. So if we did everything right, we can turn on our water, open up the drain, and come down here and inspect for leaks. And I don't see any drips. I don't hear any horrible noises. I think we are good. The next step is, sorry, tight space, get a better view, is going to be measuring out for our drawer boxes. We'll have a total of 4, and we need to notch around our P-trap and our water supplies on both sides. And boys and girls, we will be done. Okay, so I intentionally waited to make the drawer boxes for this just to see where the vanity would land on the wall. Now, I did mark center lines for my faucet, for my light fixtures, for my mirrors, and the P-trap. However, you just never know how things are going to go during a project, so you want to leave yourself as much room and flexibility as you can. And in this case, the sides ended up being a little shifted, so one side of the drawer box had to be more narrow, and the other side had to be a little bit wider in order to work around the P-trap and the water fixtures. So because the drawers we're using are going to be U-shaped, they're going to go around the P-trap and the water supply, I just lightly added some zip ties here. These aren't really under any real tension. They're still very flexible, so it's not gonna stress out the line. Just a way to, these are long water lines from the faucet. So just to keep them out of the way and close in the center, that way there's no chance of anything interfering or catching or anything like that while the drawers are moving. So with that done on both sides, focus, there we go. We're gonna install drawers.
Now, I intentionally did not give a lot of information about how to make these drawers because I have a separate video about drawer construction. If you haven't made drawers at all, start there. Don't start with these U-shapes. Additionally, you guys have seen me make drawers before on numerous projects, so rather than you see me installing all 4 of these drawers individually, I'm just going to do a little bit of this, and there we go. Ready to move on to do drawer faces. And if you'll recall, 15 minutes ago, drawer faces are going to be continuous grain. So we go back to our old friend, the panel, to give it a good thorough sanding. Now, when I'm sanding a panel, I like to mark it up with a pencil, just squiggly lines all the way down, do my first grit, come back, do my second grit. And of course, the girls were supposed to be sleeping, and neither one of them were actually sleeping. Go figure. Once everything was sanded, we could cut one side square using the track saw, and then measure and rough cut the spacing for each bank of drawers, and then we can take it over to the table saw and rip them in order to fit each drawer space. Now, typically when I attach hardware to drawer faces, I use a jig. I use the Craig jig, I'll link it below, it's great, but unfortunately these were way too wide and the Craig jig does not accommodate that size. So I had to do some measuring and custom drilling, not too bad. When it comes to installation, I use playing cards to get even spacing, same number of cards on either side, and then drill through my holes into the drawer box to secure it, pull the drawer box out, and then follow up with holes on the back with panhead screws to pull everything nice and tight. Now, can I be transparent with you guys? Can I be a little vulnerable? This is what most people would show you in a YouTube store. What they don't show you is that this took me 3 hours. This usually only takes about an hour to do, but for whatever reason, trying to get the spacing just right on these, I was working from 7 p.m. to about 10:15, 10:30 p.m. because I just wasn't satisfied with the spacing, and I am stubborn, and I don't want to spend all this time building this beautiful updated bathroom and look at drawer boxes that are going to annoy me all the time. So let that just be a lesson, guys. I've been doing this for 5-6 years now. I've built several vanities, I've built several different projects and done multiple renovations, and things like this still take me forever. So don't give up, stay tenacious, be bigger than the problem, and you can end up with really, really nice results. Speaking of which, let's get to that B-roll.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for following along, making it all the way to the end of the video, practically unheard of. If you like this video, if you like the way this all came together, I would really appreciate you engaging with the channel. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite part was. Let me know what you thought I could have done differently or better. I'm always looking for ways to improve. But in this case, I really think I might have knocked it out of the park. I really, really like how this entire space came together between the lighting, the mirrors, the vanity itself, all the modern dark fixtures. It just looks beautiful. Very, very happy with this project and overall how it added to our home value. I think this is going to be a great selling point. That's going to do it for me on this video. If you like what you saw, if you like home renovation projects or DIY woodworking projects, be sure to click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. That'll let you know every time I post a new video, and it'll keep you up to date with what I'm working on. Until next time, get out there and get to work.